Imagine waking up in a world where the very air cuts like blades of ice, where every breath turns to smoke, and the wind feels like a living beast trying to tear through your skin. In the far north, among snow-covered mountains and frozen seas, the Vikings faced winters so brutal they could freeze a man solid in minutes, and yet, somehow, they survived. They had no heaters, no electricity, no concrete walls, only wood, earth, and an intelligence that turned the cold into an ally. While the world slept beneath ice and silence, they built something more than shelters, fortresses against the winter, homes designed to trap warmth, resist the wind, and last for generations. Today, you'll discover how the Vikings built homes that defied the deadly northern cold, and the secrets hidden in their walls, roofs, and even the ground beneath their feet. If you're fascinated by this dark and frozen age, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because the story ahead will take you deep into the frozen heart of Scandinavia. Winter in the north wasn't just a season, it was an enemy. The sun vanished for months. Rivers froze solid, and the wind howled as if trying to rip the soul from anyone who dared step outside in this landscape of ice and silence. The Vikings had no choice, either master the cold or die by it. Villages lay scattered across snowy valleys and shadowed fjords. Each home was a small bastion against the frozen world. The Vikings called these structures longhouse, the legendary longhouses. They were long, low buildings, made to withstand the fury of the wind and hold every fragment of warmth they could. From the outside, they looked like part of the earth itself, roofs covered in grass and moss, walls thick as fortress stone, air heavy with the scent of smoke and burning wood. But every detail had a purpose. The cold was methodical, and so were the Vikings. First came the foundation. They dug into the frozen ground with simple tools, carving trenches where they raised oak or pine posts, wood chosen for strength and endurance. These columns formed the skeleton of the shelter, anchored deep into the soil to bear the crushing weight of winter. Each post was a vow of endurance. The walls were layered, wood on the inside, earth in the middle, and more wood on the outside. This combination worked as a natural shield. The layer of earth, known as turf, was the secret weapon, heavy, damp, and alive. It insulated the interior as if the land itself were protecting those who lived within. Inside, the world changed. The light was dim, coming only from the central fire. The low ceiling trapped the heat. Voices echoed softly, blending with the crackle of burning wood and the whisper of wind pressing through the cracks. And at the heart of the home, there was the sacred fire, a pit in the center of the floor, ringed by blackened stones and glowing embers. The smoke rose slowly through a small hole in the roof, the only link between the home and the frozen sky. That fire never went out. Even while everyone slept, someone kept watch over the coals. It was said that letting the fire die was a sign of misfortune, and in lands where death waited just beyond the door, that wasn't superstition, it was survival. The cold didn't only strike from above, it crept up from the ground. That's why the Vikings never slept on bare earth. They built raised wooden platforms covered with animal hides. There, entire families lay side by side, wrapped in bear, wolf, and sheepskins, surrounded by walls that guarded heat like a treasure chest. To an outsider, these homes looked like smoky, shadowed caves, but to a Viking, they were living fortresses. Inside, the cold wasn't merely fought, it was tamed. The longhouses weren't just dwellings, they were temples of survival, testaments to the ingenuity of a people who learned to use the earth itself to defy the impossible. And this was only the first layer of the Viking strategy against the cold. Because in the far north, even the cruelest wind could be outsmarted if the house was built with ancient wisdom. The Viking secret wasn't just in wood and stone, it was in their deep understanding of nature. They didn't try to fight winter, they studied it. They learned the sound of the wind, the way snow piled on roofs, the direction of the weak midday sun, Every detail was a clue, and with it, they built shelters that seemed to breathe with the earth itself. When the ground began to harden with frost, the builders knew it was time to act. Longhouses were raised low and close to the ground. The nearer to the earth, the less the cutting wind could strike. That simple choice reduced the cold that seeped through the walls. The roofs were set at precise angles, not only to let the snow slide off, but to prevent the crushing weight of ice from collapsing the structure during the fiercest storms. But the roof was the true masterpiece. Beneath it, beams and planks of wood. Above it, thick layers of turf, blocks of grass-covered earth, cut straight from the ground. These blocks were stacked like natural bricks, with the grassy side facing outward. When winter arrived, snow piled up on top of them. But instead of becoming an enemy, it turned into a new layer of insulation. The cold sealed the heat inside, and the houses grew even warmer. The smoke that drifted through the small hole in the roof wasn't just the breath of the fire. It was living proof that the system worked. Heat gathered and circulated slowly, warming the walls, the furniture, and even the air trapped between the roof layers. The interior of a longhouse was a microcosm of survival. The central fire burned slowly, fueled by wood, dried turf, and even animal dung, a fuel that burned long and low without dangerous flames. Around the hearth, large stones were placed to absorb heat during the day and release it at night, like hearts of stone pulsing beneath the ashes. The walls, often double-layered, hid between them moss, straw, and wool. The first natural insulators of Scandinavia, damp, dense moss, was perfect for sealing gaps. Straw created pockets of warm air, and wool, taken from the animals that lived beside them, trapped heat like a second skin for the house. Even the doors held secrets. They were low and narrow, forcing anyone who entered to bow, not out of humility, but to keep the warm air from escaping. On the inside, thick animal hides hung like curtains, blocking the wind that tried to force its way in. Light was scarce. There were almost no windows. Glass didn't exist. The few openings they had were covered with stretched animal membranes, letting a faint glow filter through without allowing the cold to enter. Darkness wasn't discomfort. It was protection. Inside that twilight, the warmth endured. During the long nights, the fire never slept. Someone was always on watch, stirring the embers, stacking wood, breathing life back into the flame. This duty often fell to the eldest in the household, the guardian of the hearth. For without the fire, everyone would freeze before dawn. And yet the fire wasn't the only source of heat. At the far end of the house, separated by wooden partitions and fences, lived the animals, goats, sheep, and sometimes even cows. Their bodies radiated warmth, enough to raise the temperature of the hall by several degrees. That heat rose, mixed with the heavy air, and filled the room. The house became a living organism, where humans, animals, and fire shared the same breath of warmth. Every plank, every layer of soil, every stone placed there was the result of centuries of observation and adaptation. The Vikings didn't just build houses, they built ecosystems of survival. But there was something even more remarkable. When the cold turned the very ground to stone, some Vikings chose to dig, and what they found beneath the earth would become one of the most ingenious inventions of the North: the underground houses, where the soil itself became a shield against the white death of winter. Beneath the wind that howled like a starving beast, some Vikings discovered that the secret to resisting the cold wasn't above the ground, but within it. When snow buried the rooftops and ice made the world groan, they dug, and from that frozen soil rose the pit houses, small, humble structures that hid a wisdom few peoples in history ever achieved. Instead of challenging the winter, they buried themselves with it. They dug into the frozen ground 1/2 meter deep, sometimes more, and used the earth's own warmth as a shield. Below the surface, the soil maintained a steady temperature, much warmer than the air above. That was the essence of Nordic survival: using nature against itself. The walls of these homes weren't just reinforced pits. They were shaped with wood, clay, and straw, a kind of living plaster made from earth, mud, and even animal dung, dried by fire until it hardened. At first, the smell was strong, but it soon faded, replaced by a sense of humid warmth and safety. From outside, no one would imagine that life existed within. The roof, covered in grass and snow, blended perfectly with the landscape. The house disappeared, invisible to both the cold and to enemies. Inside, the light was faint. Only the small, constant fire illuminated the space. The smoke rose through a narrow hole in the roof and vanished into the snow, almost imperceptible. It was a slow breath, like the sigh of a sleeping creature beneath the earth. These houses, though small, were powerful. Just a handful of people and a weak fire were enough to keep the interior warm. The heat stayed trapped, circulating between the earthen walls and the turf-covered ceiling. At night, whole families gathered around the flame, wrapped in furs, while outside the wind roared and the snow fell in silence. Inside the pit houses, time seemed to stop. The world outside disappeared. No stars, no light, no sound, only the crackle of fire and the rhythm of human hearts. Children slept close to the walls, where the warmth lingered. The elders stayed near the entrance, guarding the home, watching the flame. And the animals, goats, sheep, dogs, shared the same space, not by accident, but by wisdom. Every warm body was a spark of life, an invisible ally against the cold. These dwellings also revealed the mystical side of the Vikings. Excavations show that some buried small amulets within the foundations, pieces of bone, bare teeth, or runes carved in wood. It was their way of invoking spiritual protection against the spirits of winter, which they believed wandered through the blizzards. To the Vikings, the cold was not just a physical force. It was a living spirit, something that could be tamed but never challenged. Each house they built was a pact with that spirit. I do not fight you, but I will not fall before you. And the most astonishing part, when spring came and the ice began to melt, the houses still stood. No cracks, no collapse. The blend of wood, clay, and turf absorbed moisture and dried again naturally. It was living architecture, self-healing, shaped by the rhythm of the seasons. Modern archaeologists call it ancestral thermal engineering. The Vikings simply called it instinct, and that instinct went far beyond construction. They didn't just survive inside those homes. They turned them into temples, workshops, and sanctuaries of ritual. It's said that during the longest nights, clan leaders would perform silent ceremonies, offering drops of mead to the fire and whispering verses to the gods of the frost, pleading for a winter without tragedy. Inside those chambers of earth and smoke, something more than heat was born. The spirit of the north, resilient, quiet, and unbreakable. But when the cold tightened its grip, even fire and soil weren't enough. That's when the Vikings turned to their final secret, a weapon no frost could defeat, the human body itself and the strength of the group. And this is the most powerful part of all. When winter reached its peak and the sun disappeared for weeks, Viking houses became the only refuge against oblivion. Outside, the world was white, still, and deadly. The wind screamed through the mountains, dragging snow like ashes from the sky. But inside the longhouses, something pulsed, not just the fire, but life itself. Families gathered close to the central hearth. Men, women, children, and elders shared the same space, the same blankets, the same thick air of smoke and warmth. No one slept alone. One body warmed the next, and together they formed what we might call today a human thermal mass, a fusion of heat, love, and survival. A warrior might not have had a shield that night, but he had the warmth of his kin. The animals, always near, completed the cycle. Goats and sheep breathed softly, their vapor mingling with the heat of the fire. Dogs slept at their master's feet, and the cattle, separated by wooden partitions, radiated a steady, almost sacred warmth. The Viking home was more than a shelter. It was a living ecosystem where every being, human or not, played a part in collective survival. Before sleep, there was a ritual. Heated stones were taken carefully from the fire, wrapped in furs, and placed beneath the wooden sleeping platforms. These stones radiated warmth for hours, turning every corner of the home into a haven of comfort. Then the elders would tell stories, legends of ice gods, sea monsters, and mountain spirits. The children listened, eyes glowing with the fire's reflection, learning from an early age that cold isn't conquered by strength, but by wisdom and unity. And when the flame dimmed to embers, silence took over. The sound of snow falling on the roof, the crackle of wood in the fire, and the breathing of dozens of souls merging into one rhythm. That was the music of the North. Still, the cold would try to creep in. It slithered through cracks, crawled beneath doors, whispered through the walls, but it found no way inside. The house breathed with its inhabitants, and with every exhale, the warm air pushed the frost away. The longhouse became a heart beating beneath the snow. By morning, the world outside was still frozen, but within, the fire was reborn. The embers from the night before were stirred to life, and flames rose once more, painting the rafters with blue smoke. The cold never rested, but neither did the Vikings. They rose, tightened their furs, and stepped out again to hunt, to build, to fight, as if winter itself were just another battlefield. Centuries later, the ruins of those houses can still be seen, grassy mounds, silent and eternal. Beneath them lie the secrets of a people who didn't just survive the cold, they conquered it. The cold could freeze rivers, kill forests, and turn the sea to glass, but it never froze the Viking spirit, because in the end, their true warmth did not come from the fire. It came from one another. If you felt this ancestral strength, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you thought of this story. Tell me, could you survive a Viking winter? I'll be reading every comment and answering Warrior of the North.